Greetings and salutations! Thanks for hanging out with me for a while. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do an OEM install of Linux Mint 19.3. OEM stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer. This method of installing Linux Mint is great for anybody who builds machines or refurbishes machines and sells them online or in a shop. It's also useful for somebody who's just setting up a computer for a friend down the street and they want to have a very professional presentation when that person boots up the machine. An OEM install allows you to set up the computer, install all of the software and the drivers necessary, and then when the end user gets it, they boot up the machine and they create their own account and they set their own username and password and they get their own desktop experience. What a lot of people are doing these days who are selling computers pre-installed with Linux, especially Linux Mint and Ubuntu, is they're doing this very naive practice where they create a dummy account. It's an account with a name like user, and then they'll set the password to something like password. In Linux, you can change the password, but it will cause keyring issues on a lot of desktops. A lot of applications, when they launch, check the keyring to see if the password is there, and if it doesn't match up, it'll throw up an error message, and that can really mess up a novice user. Changing the username on Linux is damn near impossible, which leaves people to have to create a new account where they can select their own username and select their own password. But that can cause problems as well because there are issues with permissions from one account to the other that they might not be able to deal with readily, especially if they're novice users. So it's really best if you just let them create their own account and create their own experience. And that's how this works. Now, I ordinarily don't ask people to share my videos. I figure if you like it, you're going to share it. But this one I'd like to have shared because I have to deal with the fallout from people all the time who buy these machines and then they ask me how to switch this over and all this other. It's a pain in the butt. And this recently just happened with my brother who just bought a machine. And it's kind of a pet peeve. I'd like to raise awareness about the ability to do this because it's actually really super easy to do. It's not hard at all. And it's just so professional. Let's go ahead and jump right into doing it. We'll talk more about it as we roll along, all of the cool advantages and everything. So we're going to use GNOME Boxes, which is virtualization software, to do this today. I am going to set up Linux Mint 19.3. Now, even if you're seeing this video later on and Linux Mint 20 is coming out, guess what? You will most likely still be able to do this. Because this process hasn't changed and it's probably not going to change. There will always be an OEM install option. It may be slightly different. You can also do this in Ubuntu. I want to give it a little bit more memory than 2 gigs, please. The hard drive size is fine because we're just creating this little virtual machine. So let me go ahead and create the machine. And this is going to boot right into it. So let me do this and then hit the space bar on this menu. And we want to choose OEM install right there. It's the second option on Linux Mint 19.3. It's a little further down on the list on earlier versions of Linux Mint, but it's right there. And what it's going to do now is it's going to launch us right into the installer. It's not going to go to a desktop or anything like that. It's just going to open the installer and we're just going to install the system. There are a few little differences. How long this is going to take is going to it's going to depend. I almost said pretend. It's going to depend on how fast your hardware is. It's going to depend on your internet connection. Forgot to mention before you start this, you really should be using Ethernet. If it's a machine where you have no choice but to use Wi-Fi, it'll be all right. You'll probably want to make sure that you delete the Wi-Fi network before you set the machine up before you prepare the machine for the end user, you do the last step. You don't want anybody to have your network and your password and all that stuff. If you use Ethernet, you don't have to worry about that. So the first thing that you're going to get prompted to do is choose a language. We're going to stick with English. That's fine. And then we got to give it a batch ID. Now, this is for people who are making hundreds of machines, and usually that process goes like this. You create one machine that is set up the way you want it to, and then you build a whole bunch of machines just like it. And on that first machine, you install the operating system, then you clone the drive. So you clone a bunch of hard drives, so all you got to do is put the drive in, and the machine automatically boots up, and the person on the other end creates their account, and it's happiness. So you need some way to keep track of those batches. So they'll have a batch ID. We will just put in Easy Linux. You can put anything in here you like. Bob's Computer Repair, whatever you want to do. And then we move on. Okay, we're going to select a keyboard. This is a temporary setting. It does not reflect what happens with the end user. We do want to install the third-party codecs. Make sure that our end user doesn't have to go hunting for anything and everything works the way it should. And then from this point on, pretty much any setting that you see is temporary for this temporary account we're creating. What it's doing now is it's getting that stuff together. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is to partition the hard drive. I strongly recommend that you allow the system to do this automatically, especially if the machine is equipped with Secure Boot and UEFI. If you want to be creative and create an extra home partition, if you want to have more than one drive in the machine, go right ahead if you're comfortable with that. But if you're not 100% comfortable and the machine only has one drive in it, don't bother with it. Just let the machine do the drive. Do all the partitioning and the formatting. It'll be fine. It's going to confirm with us that it's going to use the whole drive with one ext4 partition. That's perfectly all right. We're choosing a time zone. This is just for the temporary account. And now it's going to ask for a password. You can put anything in here you want. This is a temporary account and a temporary password. I'm going to put in a super simple 4-letter password, but it's very secure, I can assure you. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm going to just make you wonder what them 4 letters are. It ain't nothing dirty. Now we just do an install. From this point forward, it's going to install and get everything set up. And like I said, how long this is going to take is depending on your hardware, depending on your system, and your internet connection. So what we're going to do is pause this video while it's doing it, and we'll come back when it's ready to reboot. That really didn't take long at all, and we're ready to restart. I am doing this today on a different computer than I have been making videos on lately. This is my son's gaming laptop. It is an Asus, and it has an i7 processor in it, and it has 16 gigabytes of memory. It's got a 64 gigabyte SSD for the boot partition, and then the root partition and boot and everything. And then the home partition is on a spinning drive. This machine gets it. It's fast. My old Dell doesn't do so hot with virtualization lately, so I figured I would do it here. Now I have restarted this, and there is every chance in the world that it is locked up. If it does that to you, don't panic. The operating system is installed. Sometimes this just happens with the Ubiquiti installer. It's been like this for years. I'm pretty sure it's locked up. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds here and see what happens. Yeah, I think it has. And so if you don't get the little message that says press enter to restart the system, take out your boot media, then just take out your boot media anyway. And then, well, wait, it's making a liar out of me. No, it's not. It's locked up. I thought it was doing something, but it's not. So let's go ahead and we will force shutdown. No big deal at all. You might have to hold down the power button for 5 seconds if that happens on your machine, and then it will shut itself down. While I have the opportunity, I'm going to do a real quick thing here. I'm going to change the name. This is how you have to do it in boxes. You can't set up the machine first. You have to do it later. So let's just go ahead and do that. All right. And then I want to remove the installation media manually, or else it'll pop up when we go back to doing that. So I like that. Just hit close to get out. And now we will boot that thing back up. Now we are going to be booting into the temporary account that we created so we can set the machine up. We are not setting up a permanent account yet. That happens with the end user. You'll see what that's like here in just a few moments. Also, we're not going to have the proper drivers installed, so this is going to render pretty big on the screen. The display is going to be just a little weird, but that's okay. We're going to fix that. So there's the desktop, and yes, it tells me that I'm running in software rendering mode. Get rid of that. We don't need the welcome screen in our face. Now, this is the temporary account, and you must not click this link where it says prepare for shipping to end user. If you do that, it's going to delete this account, and the next time you boot up, it's going to have you create another account. So we're not going to touch that until we're ready to go. So what you need to do, first of all, is to go ahead and update the machine. I would do that for somebody. I wouldn't leave them with a whole bunch of updates to do. So I clicked help, I think. That's not what I wanted. Just want to click OK. Thanks. And what this is going to do is it's going to go out and look for an updated update manager, which is the first thing that Linux Mint does at this point in their development. And you will go ahead and install that. And give it my super secret password. This only takes a couple of seconds for it to do. I am not going to install all the updates in this video. It just takes too long. There's a lot of updates at this point on Linux Mint 19.3. And installing updates can take, if the particular release that you're working with is a little long in the tooth, it can take an hour or two, depending on your internet connection. So I'm not going to do that. At this point, we would go ahead and install it. Do not bother to change the mirrors, even though it's prompting you to do so, because the end user really needs to do that themselves. So I would leave that alone, and we're going to pretend like we installed the updates. So what you now need to do is go ahead, install your updates, and before you do anything else to the system, we will reboot. We're just going to pretend that we installed all those updates. Okay. And we go ahead and open that back up again. Put that in full screen mode, and we're going to go back to the desktop. What we need to do now is to go into the system and install any drivers necessary. Also, if you want to add any software for your end user, you can do that now. Let's say that you know the person on the other end wants to have Google Chrome installed. Well, you could download it and install it for them right now. And If there's any other software that you'd like to add to the system, now would be the time to do that. Here's the deal though. Making modifications to the desktop, like changing the font, the background picture, is not going to stick. This is a temporary account. If you want to have a custom layout for Linux Mint, you're going to be selling a bunch of machines. What you're going to have to learn how to do is to edit the stuff that is in /etc/skel, S-K-E-L. That directory contains skeleton files that tell the system how to lay the desktop out when a new user is created. That is way, way beyond the scope of this video, but it is possible to do. So if you're going to be doing this for a living, you're going to make a lot of computers and you're going to ship them with Linux, that's something you might want to look into doing, but we're just going to ship it with a stock account. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to open up the driver manager, and you want to see if there are any drivers available for your hardware. In this case, we're not going to have anything available because it doesn't have drivers, but I'm going to open that anyway just to show you. So it'll go out and refresh, and it's refreshing the cache, and then it's going to look for drivers, and it's going to come up and say it can't find any. I already know that. Now, if we were doing this in VirtualBox, we would have drivers available to us. What kind of drivers can you expect to find here? Stuff for your video card, if it needs proprietary drivers. Wi-Fi cards sometimes need proprietary drivers. That would be really nice to have ready to go when the person booted up the machine. You want to have that installed. In this case, I'm just going to install a couple of packages here. And let's go ahead and make that bigger so you guys can see it better. And I am going to sudo apt install. And we're going to get Spice. This is for the the video drivers for the GNOME Boxes program, which uses Spice for the video management. It's QEMU in the background for boxes. And it's worked out quite well for me. I like it. It's very simple. Oop, that's not going to do that. And we need web. Yep. And let's install HTOP just to prove that we can put software in. So you can put a whole bunch of stuff in here. Go ahead and do that. I'll show you a couple of other tweaks that I like to do. Oh, I put in my real password from my other system. I forgot my super secret password. Okay. Yes, please go. Shouldn't take it long. This is very small files here. They should install very quickly. Now, a couple of things I like to do to Linux Mint, or any, well, one of them is for any Linux install, but one I like to do for Linux Mint I'll show you real quick. Okay, so that's done. So we'll go over here and we want to get disks. Program called disks. Here is where you can check out your hard drive. If you're reloading a machine, for instance, and you're just starting from scratch and you hadn't had a chance to really check the hard drive out, this will tell you if there's anything wrong with it. So you might want to stop now and get another hard drive if there is, because it will show you the smart data. It's not doing that because there is no, well, actually it is. It's passing it right through. So there it's telling me that the hard drive is in good shape. So that means that GNOME Boxes passes through smart data. What we want to do is go up to the little menu here, little kebab menu or hamburger menu, and we want to go to drive settings right there, and we want to go to write cache. We want to make sure that this is turned on. Now, what I have found out is that this is actually turned on, but you need to activate this so you can gain control over it. For a long time, I thought you were turning it on, but I have since found that that's not exactly true, that it usually is turned on by default by the distribution. But we want to have control over it, and we want to make sure that we can see that it's on. So I go ahead and do this anyway. And what that'll do is it will allow the system to cache some of what it needs to read, some of what it's read, and what it needs to write in memory for a little while, and that speeds up the operation. There is a slight chance that you could lose data, but I've been doing that on Linux for 10 years, and I've never lost one bit of data, so I don't worry about it. The other thing I'd like to show you is go to Synaptic Package Manager. So let's get the menu open. Come on, mouse, cooperate. Thank you. And we'll type in Synaptic. And it's type something in wrong. S-Y-N. Thank you. Synaptic Package Manager. There you are. Okay. And the setting that I'd like to change here is kind of a pet peeve I have with Linux Mint. They, thank you, have this set up where it does not consider recommended packages as dependencies. And that is kind of the way Debian does it. The problem with that is that this is based on Ubuntu. And Ubuntu developers are not particularly good at differentiating the list of necessary dependencies and recommended software that goes along with their applications. And what can happen here is that you can install something from the Ubuntu archive, and then you're sitting there wondering why half the features don't work. It's because it relies on some other program that didn't get installed because the developer didn't list it as a dependency. He listed it as a recommended application. I just go ahead and install everything, and that's going to work from the software manager in Linux Mint from now on. So now that we have done what we need to do, we've done all our settings and all our tweaking, and we've installed all our software, we can go ahead and click this icon right here on the desktop that says prepare for the end user. Double click. There it goes. Not used to this touchpad. Go put in the password yet again. Click OK. And when that icon disappears, we're done. Or maybe it doesn't disappear. I think we're done. Alright, so now let's go ahead and restart the machine yet again. And I'm going to go ahead and show you what happens when the end user gets the machine. We'll create the account. We're going to pretend like we're the end user here, is what we're going to do. I got depend and pretend mixed up again. You notice that, don't you? This is what happens when you get old, kids. Your brain, it does weird things with words. I don't know why. It just does. And here it comes. And I see that the Spice agent is working. I can tell you that because what I just saw on that desktop. So, what you're looking at now is what your end user is going to get. Once you click that prepare for the end user and you shut the machine down, you put it in the box, you ship it off, put it up on the shelf, whatever. They get the machine, they're going to open it up. We're going to get prompted to create an account from scratch. And first we'll have to choose our language, and we're going to choose English because that works fine with me. And the keyboard laid out is US English. That's okay. Yes, we're doing all this over again because it's a different account. This time the time zone matters. And I am in EST. And now we create give the credentials for a real account. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay. And as far as machine name is concerned, we can change it to whatever we like. I'm going to call it LM VM, right? That username is fine. And this time around, I'm going to put in a real password. I don't think I'm going to keep this machine around, but just in case I do, we'd like to make it so it's like a real machine. And now it is going to go and it's going to set up the hardware and it's going to create that account. This takes a little while to do, actually. And then what it's going to do is go to the login screen, and then we can log into the desktop for the first time. I noticed the last time I did this when I was testing it that it kind of hangs up here at configuring keyboard. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and pause, and when it's done and we're at that login screen, we'll come back. Okay, it's just about done applying changes, so we should get to the login screen very soon here. Essentially what it's doing now is just doing the final setup, and it's removing the Ubiquity installer and anything that goes along with the installation. There are some packages that carry over that are necessary to create that first account and get all that set up, and then it goes back and it takes them off the machine. So that's what it's doing right now, and it does take it a few moments to do. This whole process, once you put the information in and setting up the account, in a virtual machine it seems to be taking about 5 minutes. I'm sure that if it was on regular hardware and if it was on a newer, faster machine, it would probably be really quick, maybe like 30 seconds at the most. But it does seem to take it just a little while to do it in a virtual environment. I think this laptop that I'm using is a little bit faster than my old big boy Dell T5400 workstation. I think it's just a tiny bit faster. But I have had a terrible time with virtualization in the last couple of years for one reason or the other. A lot of that has to do with some of the changes they made to fix some of those terrible exploits that came along earlier with the CPUs. So now that we're here, let's go ahead and log in. And we should get a desktop here very shortly. It's actually creating all the directories and everything for the desktop in the background right now, since this is the first boot. So this is not an accurate representation of how long it takes Linux Mint to bring up a desktop. We're there. We're on the desk. And it did not resize the screen properly. It should do that. So let's just confirm that HTOP is installed, which was that piece of software that we added. Yes, HTOP is running. So you can see the specs of the machine right there. Not bad at all. So let's go ahead and reboot one more time. Then it should come up with the desktop. The screen should be rescaled properly on the display. Doesn't seem to catch that the very first time around that it boots. So this is now the second boot of the new desktop. And hopefully it didn't log out on the hang up on the shutdown again. Nope, it didn't. Here we go. We're there. Okay. Yes, now we've resized the desktop. Still getting the software rendering notice. That just happens in boxes anyway, but it doesn't seem to affect the performance. It runs pretty quickly. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. We have a fresh install of Linux Mint in a GNOME Boxes virtual machine that we did as an OEM and then set up the account as the end user, and you have come along for the entire process. As I said at the beginning of the video, please share this with people who are going to be refurbishing computers. Let's get the word out about the OEM installs so we don't have a bunch of machines flooding the internet that a novice might buy and they get all excited and go, ooh, I get to use Linux Mint, and then they run into issues because they have to deal with a dummy account that says user for the username and password for the password. As usual, your feedback is always welcome. And you can check us out online at EzeeLinux.com. Give us a like on Facebook if you are a Facebook user. And check out EzeeTalk, which is our forum. It's fast and it's free and it's fun. And there are links to all of that in the description to the video. Just click Show More and they will pop right up. Thank you very much for watching. We will do it again soon.